Well, here we are at the Chateau Saint-Côme. 9th Parachute Battalion came here after Merville during the night of the 7th, 8th of June. They were actually over in Amfreville, in the Amfreville Chateau, and they made a journey that night. In advance, they sent forward a captured car that was driven by Major Eddie Cholton and another chap. And the battalion went through Breville, somehow escaping through the Germans in the dark, went down the hill a bit, along the track into the corn, and arrived at the bottom of this sunken lane beside the Bois-des-Monts. When Otway got there and started coming up the road, he could clearly see Major Cholton at the top of this slope because he was smoking. You could see the light of his cigarette. So of course when he got here he gave Cholton a rocket, but Cholton had said that he'd been up into the chateau around that area and there was no one about. So that was fine. And they then went next door and occupied a little bungalow in the Bois-des-Monts and set up defensive positions. When the 9th Parachute Battalion arrived, they only had 150 men. They'd been scattered to the winds, and what with their casualties at Merville as well. Colonel Otway sent patrols forward to the chateau, found out there weren't any Germans there. It had been a headquarters, but he decided just to deny the chateau to the Germans by patrolling and to set up his positions to form a killing zone. So he decided to occupy a trench, or a ditch it was, along the line of those woods over there. That was known, it got to be known as Bomb Alley by members of A Company. Along this side, on the other side of the road in the Bois-des-Monts, and then down that side of the road where we've just been, down the sunken lane. When the Germans attacked in increasing numbers, they were met by all sorts of fire from different areas. There were Vickers machine guns just here on the entrance to the chateau. Several patrols to deny the Germans the use of the chateau. One which involved a chap called Jeff Pattinson. They'd gone into the chateau, he'd gone up the stairs, got the fright of his life when he saw himself in a mirror. He didn't realise it was himself, but a reflection in the mirror. He was in such a state. He and Jack Watkins were then sent out while they were searching the chateau to try and see if there was any Germans beyond the barns over the back. They didn't get very far. They went to a wall that runs around there and saw some Germans coming towards them. So Jack sort of held Jeff back and said, "When I run, you run." So they did that. The Germans saw them. Jeff ran into one of the stables and the German fire followed him in, hit him in the back of the legs, across the back of the legs. He never really knew whether it was a bullet or a chip from the ricochet off the concrete. Both come running out of there. Jeff, with his boots full of blood, run past the chateau while the men in the chateau started firing to try and keep the Germans off. But Jeff ran across here into Bomb Alley, where he was seen to by a chap called Arthur Mobsby, who'd go put a bit of a bandage on him. And the fighting got increasingly desperate until the 12th of June. After the 5th Black Watch attack there, the remnants were pushed into this area and they actually occupied the chateau and the area of the stables. In the woods there, the Germans got into the woods and all the Black Watch there started running back through the woods. And that was only saved by Brigadier Hill, in effect, gathering together some Canadians and clearing that wood right through to the edge of that chateau, where the chateau is just there. Breville was a real sore in the airborne defensive perimeter. And so on the 11th of June, the 5th Black Watch had come up the sunken lane and taken up the positions of what was B Company and 9th Battalion and advanced across these fields towards the crossroads at Breville. Obviously they'd done especially well in the desert as part of the 51st Highland Division, but they hadn't trained for warfare in Normandy. And so they walked across here in their lines and they were allowed to get to so far. There was a hedge a bit further over the crest there. When they reached that hedge, machine guns and mortars opened up on them. That was A Company that came out this bit. B Company then tried to do a slightly wider arc around another hedge to try and get to the road, which was unsuccessful. C Company tried to go further down that way and get up and had no luck at all. In the end, they came streaming back leaving many, many dead in the fields here, back into the Bois-des-Monts. Overall, there was nearly 200 casualties for the 5th Black Watch on that day. In the early hours of D-Day, the 9th Parachute Battalion jumped into Normandy with over 600 men. The drop was very scattered, and at their drop-ins at the rendezvous, only 150 men arrived for the attack on Merville. Obviously they did the Merville job. They had some of the men from a glider which landed there as well, but they arrived here with 200 men at the most. Some of those that were dropped wide did end up along this road. There's Lemenal Crossroads, which was where Brigade HQ was, and that was kind of a beacon for everyone that was dropped wide. So there was quite a number of 9th Battalion men up in that area. But the 9th, when they arrived here on the 8th, they had about 200 men. The fighting got more and more intense as the days went by. And some of those men did, in the end, they did come back from the crossroads to reinforce the battalion. You can't describe how bad the fighting was here. Obviously with Pegasus Bridge is the very well known thing for the 6th Airborne Division, and of course the Merville Battery. But if you asked any 9th Battalion man, they would always say this was the worst place they ever fought at. It really was a horrendous place. There were dead bodies all over the place. Breville, which is of course just down that road, during the evening, General Gale decided that he had to clear Breville, so he sent in the 12th Parachute Battalion, and they did a fantastic job in clearing Breville. They had a horrendous time, and there's no doubt, as a German document which has only recently come to light, that the Germans in Breville were planning another attack in this direction, and who knows whether they could have held on for that night. You see on the 13th of June, 9th Parachute Battalion was relieved by the 52nd Oxford and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry and moved down to the road to brigade headquarters. So they weren't taken out of the front line. They were given what were called a slight rest in effect, but still in the front line. It was standing in the churchyard of Bréville-les-Monts. Bréville-les-Monts sits on the Breville Ridge with Pegasus Bridge, which it overlooks there, and the landing zones and Ronville itself. Breville was held by the Germans from 6th of June and was a thorn in the side of the British perimeter here, with constant attacks coming in against the commandos and in the other direction against the 9th Parachute Battalion, and also from here down across the DZ on the 10th of June. So General Gale needed this position to be cleared, and on the 12th he finally decided that it had to be done, and a plan was made, a hasty plan that night for the 12th Battalion to move up to Amfreville and attack in this direction. Before the action began, a 3rd Div barrage, artillery barrage, was timed to hit this position, hit the church, and all hell let loose because partly the artillery fire landed short, straight into the positions where the 12th Battalion were forming up. The Germans, realising something was going on, then opened artillery fire themselves and mortar fire. So the 12th Battalion were going into a real storm of a battle. However, the depleted 12th Parachute Battalion fought their way in sections into this area under heavy fire, with the church itself on fire, and that everyone remembers who survived that battle, the sound of the wind going through the organ pipes creating this peculiar noise. Everyone remembers that. One of the reasons the artillery barrage was such a problem was because the forward observation officer was killed in the barrage, and he is now buried in this cemetery. Captain Hugh Wald 53rd Worcestershire Yeomanry Air Landing Light Regiment, Royal Artillery. These are the ruins of the church at Bréville-les-Monts. In fact, the whole town was pretty much flattened during the fighting and the artillery barrage. This is one of the few churches that they didn't rebuild, and they've built a new one just beside it.